Hello, I'm Lisa Martin, and welcome to DoubleClick. In business, agility and innovation are intertwined. They share the same goal: the creation of customer-inspired business outcomes to drive bottom-line growth. Today, many organizations are managing stale technology, which destroys agility and eats away at progress and profit. As C-suite executives and their teams grapple with technical debt, operational effectiveness diminishes even with boosts of investment. Organizations are struggling to keep up with the pace of change. Today, we tackle this question: is your technology stack helping or hindering your business's agility? We're joined by Holger Mueller, VP and Principal Analyst for Constellation Research, award-winning CIO Lloyd of Brock Group, the leading provider of industrial specialty services, and President and CTO of Infor, the one and only Soma. Welcome, everyone. Let's dive right in. The crux of today's conversation is really around to what extent technology is helping or hindering a business's agility. You get to talk with so many different customers, so really set the stage here. What are you seeing in the market, and why is business agility in such demand now?
That's a great question, Lisa. Thanks for having me. And it is at the core of every business, because basically the markets any enterprise operates in move with a certain velocity. And you, if you want to stay in these markets and be successful and thrive, have to match that velocity and actually succeed, overcome that velocity a little bit, because you want to be a disruptor and not the disrupted, right? So technology is the enabler for that, but it's not only about the technology, it's also about the people. So you have to move both people and technology, because only technological agility is nothing if you don't have the agility in your people as well.
Lloyd, bringing you into the conversation, define an agile business as the CIO of Brock Group. What does it mean to you?
As Holger touched on, the pace of change has just continually increased. And so businesses have to adapt or they're going to lose market share. So they look to their organization. How do we do things? How do we do things better, faster? And then they look to technology to help automate and bring more information to those processes. So we become an enabling factor to the business to be able to make those kinds of rapid changes.
An enabling factor, I like that. So I'm bringing you into the conversation now. What are you hearing? Is what Holger and Lloyd talked about, is it ringing true? What are you witnessing?
We see a lot of customers just like Holger does, as an analyst. And what we find is that customers, businesses, just like you heard from Lloyd, are ever changing. And the technology that supported their business 20 years ago, it supported them well. But with the velocity of change that is happening in their businesses today, customers cannot keep up with their internal technical debt to be able to really morph that technology to support their business needs. So what we're hearing is that customers want something that is purposeful for what they do, but at the same time, they need a lot of flexibility as their businesses get transformed, either by themselves or industry changes that force them to do that. They need the ability to take the technology as an enabler to be able to effectively change themselves, to be in the market, to be the leader in the business they are in. So that's what we hear, and that's why there's a lot of movement in cloud and in think about technologies that capture data as a source of innovation. All of these things point back to really how do we get the businesses to be much more agile.
Holger, I want to ask you if you could give us kind of that 10,000-foot view. What are some of the macro trends that you're seeing from an agile business transformation perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we have to look what enterprises are faced with, right? I mean, let's not talk about the pandemic. Let's not talk about uncertainty in economic sides, what's going to happen to interest rates, what's going to happen in the next US election, what's going to happen with radicalization of people, what's going to happen with retirement ages and all these things. We also have this new technology, which I won't mention yet, right? The two-letter acronym. Let's see who has to mention it first here. But there's so many things which are happening. And the underlying background to that, as we step back for a moment, is that for the first time, technology can do more of what business best practice demand. And that creates the opportunity for enterprises who can move fast, who can be more agile than other ones, to create new business models. And these new business models are very, very hurtful, painful for those who cannot react to them, cannot adapt to them, and don't have the agility to adapt to them. And that is the big, big challenge that we see, right? We have the custom standard examples of Airbnb and Uber and so on, all leveraging the internet, smartphones as front ends for people to disrupt capital-intensive industries, as an example, right? Those are tangible business models, but it's happened everywhere in every industry. And that's where it's key that an enterprise has the right platforms which can move faster than the markets they're in, so they don't get, I created this word travolged, right? From travolgere, Italian, you get overcome, you get overwhelmed by things. You don't want to get travolged in your industry, in your business.
Right, and this is across every industry. Holger, sticking with you, and then Soma, same question to you. What are business leaders telling you is their number one issue, and how does it relate to agility?
Yeah, so one thing that, just to pile on what Holger was talking about, just to use an example, we serve equipment manufacturers as a segment, right? So traditionally, manufacturers who built and sold equipment are now thinking about new revenue streams, right? So once I sell the equipment, I perhaps not sell, but rent. That's a different business model. And I perhaps, once I sell the product, I want to be able to sell service as an offering, as a new revenue stream. In order to do those kind of things, you need to be able to morph your business processes, morph your business model to be able to support the customers and create these new revenue streams. And to do that, if you don't have an agile, flexible backbone, that makes it very difficult for the customer to be able to transform their business. And that is really the need that we see across the board. Yeah. This is just an example in industrial manufacturing, but the same thing is true in healthcare or in process manufacturing. All of these organizations are trying to be more creative, at the same time trying to be differentiating from their competition with their customers they serve. All of these pressures can only be met if you are able to have a business that is agile and is able to adapt to the needs of their customers.
Right, that's a great point, to the needs of their customers, who today want it now, real-time, personalized to me, and relevant. Holger, same question to you. What's the number one issue that folks are coming to you with where agility is concerned?
Soma's example is great, right? You move from selling things to a subscription model. Your whole ERP system is not set up to subscription model. You have to change setups, configurations. You might have to have different vendors integrate them. We're talking about months, quarters to even come up with that. And that shows how difficult it is when that happens, when your competitor does it, right? And your customers like that new business model, right? So it's really, really hard for enterprise to have that if their backbone, which is a ERP system, the platforms to support them don't have the pre-built capabilities to interact to different new innovative digital business models. Right? One big example is happening on the people side, which is that not everybody is working in the same time zone. COVID has shown us that you can work from anywhere in the world. The talent pools are global. That creates different challenges on how work is being done, how work is being measured. We have the whole discussion about going back to the offices. And we see similar things across the whole board of the value chain where these are significant challenges. Digitalization of the value chain is one big part. Getting things more personalized, getting things more customized are things which are very, very hard for a mass manufacturer, as an example. Getting better visibility for better customer satisfaction into your supply issues. We all know about the supply chain issues which some companies have faced during the logistic issues which were during the pandemic. So the problems are pretty much everywhere, right? I haven't even mentioned regulation and compliance issues which you can have from running in the right space there and staying compliant, deciding where you want to be compliant. So the issues are galore. There's no specific corner from that, right? Which leads to new technology responses. We can talk about that later, like low code, no code as a response for a business to help to get the automation they need from that perspective. But the challenges, unfortunately, are from everywhere.
We're going to be talking about that innovation in a moment. Lloyd, I want to bring you back in from a customer's perspective. You did a great job of defining to you as COO of Brock what an agile business means, but can you walk us through the journey that you've taken to get the organization in a good position? Well,
it's not an easy journey. That's probably the beginning point. In a lot of what we talked about, Holger mentioned just the amount of change that's been happening over the course of even just the last couple of years. That's sort of compounded the whole issue of how fast these business cycles change. and the uncertainty of everything around it, business is looking for managing supply chains in areas where they never had to before. Consumerization of electronics, where customers are now expecting a different way to interface with the organization. And it's forcing us to have a platform that has a lot of flexibility and adaptability into it, and go through what I refer to as sort of microcycles of change. Rather than doing these large, big bang approaches to adjusting things, which take years, by the time you get something implemented and really truly adopted by the business, you've gone through another change, expectations have adjusted, supply chains have made some shifts, and you're going back and trying to revisit that. I think the critical thing is a couple of aspects. One is having an organization culturally that's prepared for those kind of changes, that is looking for innovation. And there's an Austrian economist, Ludwig von Mises, has a thing called the human action model, which really kind of has three components for human change to really occur effectively. First is felt uneasiness of the current situation. The second is a clear or a vision of a better way. And then the last piece is a clear, safe path forward. If those three conditions exist, then people are more interested or willing to be able to take change. So helping an organization understand that, to be able to recognize some of it, we call business case discipline, going through and identifying through a business case process where the opportunity is so that the organization starts to get that felt uneasiness. Then the vision sets out, well, imagine instead of having this issue that we actually had these conditions. Sounds good. How do we get to that point? And then it's that clear, safe path forward. That clear, safe path forward really can't be 2 years of a major implementation that is very disruptive. And that's where you got to have a platform all ready to go. We talked about all those old legacy technologies that are very constrained and not flexible and adaptable. But getting a platform in that allows you to start to initiate those microcycles in, getting the benefit for that area, and then going on to the next one, just continuing that cycle of innovation.
From an agility perspective, when you're in customer conversations, where is speed one of those critical factors in really getting the organization and the people and the processes to identify and build the right platform?
Yeah, so I actually want to start with an example to sort of continue on Lloyd's point, right? If you think about the human action model, like I'm going to use an industry we're all familiar with, healthcare and, nurses, right? During the COVID and after COVID, hundreds of thousands of nurses have left the profession, right? So they can't retain the people because nurses burn out. And the more people leave, you work the people you have over time and they burn out. So it's a sort of a vicious cycle, right? So how do you break that? This is not something that can wait years to figure out what the solution is, right? So when you feel that unease, the next thing you think about is there a solution to solve this? Is there a better way to do it? So one of the ways you could solve it is if I knew that the patient that being cared for, I know the patient's conditions, you have your acuity information, that I know this patient who's got a pneumonia but also has dementia, I know the nurse needs to spend more time, right? So having that kind of a flexible model, which in the case of Infor, where I am, that's the type of thing that we look at all the time to flexibly solve these problems. If I know the patient's condition, I know the nurse's credentials, I can allocate the right amount of time for the nurse to practice at the top of their license. That creates better satisfaction for the nurse, less burnout. The organization can retain the nurse for a longer period of time. That's the type of thing that's just one problem. Every industry has problems like that, right? So how quickly can you adapt requires, for this particular problem to solve, you need data. You need to be able to have a data strategy that you get all this data from clinical systems, from ERP, to put them together to really solve this problem. And when you solve this problem, you need to have a way to create level of automation that eliminates manual work, so that the nurse can get to take care of patients versus doing things that are administrative in nature.
Well, I want to go back to you. You gave a great, honest, authentic answer about the journey to agility is very challenging. You need to align business agility with business strategy. I want to kind of pivot off something that Soma said, and that's the data strategy. We talk about business strategy and vision. What's the data strategy that your organization has developed, and how is it kind of a catalyst for that agile journey?
Yeah, it's a key component to it. So the platform is as Soma sort of mentioned, is ways that you're going to end up collecting information at different points in various processes, and then bringing that into some data store that you can then model against, so that you can go look for where those opportunities exist. In the past, when we had all of these very sort of siloed sets of information, it was left up to manual intervention to bring those together. We had various technologies where you could pool that stuff together, but there was still a lot of manual intervention to do that because the data didn't really map out entirely well together. So you had to make a lot of manual adjustments. Well, today, there's a lot better set of tools that are out there that allow you not only to bring that data in, bring the large volumes of data in, so that depending on the kinds of industries that you're in, you can get better analysis cross-process. And that's really where most of the disruptive changes in business are happening, are cross-process. There's always been, I think, a level of individual process focus. My AP cycle is not very good, so I'll go fix that. But when we start looking at the overall supply chain, it requires us to really take a look at all those individual process flows across that, bring it together, and in sort of the theory of constraints, as you remove one obstacle, you're just going to force more volume into the next process point. If you can predict that and make those changes almost simultaneously, you get tremendous amount of value, not just sort of this incremental piece of it with further frustration down the line.
How do you assess an organization's agile maturity? What are some of the key factors that you're looking for and advising on?
Well, you look at the challenges in the past and the challenge in the future, right? And you do kind of like war games and say, what if, right? I mean, you take the example of the taxi company where Uber comes to town, right? And you thought they never come to our town, we're small, and all of a sudden they're there, and all of a sudden you say, who can build me a mobile app? Right? Those are things which you shouldn't experience in real business world, but you should experience them in kind of like thinking about what can my competition do? What can I do? Where are the pain points, both on the people that matter, right? Which are suppliers on the things the enterprise gets in, employees which are working on the value creation, and customers, prospects, and partners on the go-to-market side, right? How can I take away pain points with the help of technology and with appropriate training of people to allow them to be successful in their part? And this could be hypothetical. And like Lloyd was saying before, you have to be rigorous to figure out what you want to prioritize, where you want to put the eggs in the basket. But it's important that a business has multiple ways of operandi that can be flexible in operating different ways. Might it be for them trying to disrupt their market? Might it be for them having to react maybe in different geographies of their market? Their go-to-market, their working might be different in another continent than it's in their headquartered continent. And that is usually an unbelievable challenge for traditional systems. And what you have to see is that the platform that you build on, the vendors you trust, have a higher speed to react on things than what your markets demand, right? You will never be able to win with Roman technology today, right? For everybody to remind you, Roman technology is marble plates and carrier pigeons, right? I mean, it might be all ecological, right? You can read marble plates in the sun very well, and they don't have a battery problem. And carrier pigeons are very ecological. You just don't want to deal with all the excrements they create. If it's a problem in that, there's a TCO and technical debt in any technology, but you cannot win on Roman technology today. And you can also not win on your ERP system from 20 years ago. You can maybe stay in business with your ERP system from 10 years ago, but you're scratching barely by, and you need a modern ERP system and platform today in order to be agile and successful in your business.
Soma, when you're in customer conversations, how do you advise that they kind of evaluate their readiness for an agile transformation? Some of the things you've touched on, like culture, people, process, but what are some of those things that you kind of guide organizations in terms of really assessing their readiness to transform?
Yeah, so number one is that most organizations are coming off of a scenario where a system that was put in place 20 plus years ago, and they continue to change it based on the people's preferences in that organization, and this is the way to do a particular part of the business process. And that is a huge barrier for many of the organizations to get over. So when you go to modern systems in the cloud, and you want to be able to have a system that is a shared infrastructure, that if I'm a food and beverage company, I want to be able to share that infrastructure with hundreds of other companies that are running on it. So the innovations continue to accelerate over time. But in order to do that, though, the organization needs to sort of adopt the best practices that are being served up from the provider, the software provider, and that's easier for than done.
Sure.
Right. So people don't want to change back to the basic human action model that Lloyd talked about. So making that leap, that you are ready to be able to embrace something different than what you have done before, unless it is a secret sauce for that company, right? There are reasons you may want to stick to something unique, but that should be few and far in between, not the general business process. There is no differentiation needed, then adopt the best practice. That to me is the number one barrier for adoption of these new technologies and getting into a modern infrastructure.
I want to talk now. We've talked about what Agile business means, Lloyd, to you. Holger, you've given us your examples of what you've seen out there in practice, recommendations. Soma, you've done the same thing. What's the ideal Agile business state look like, Lloyd, on that journey, obviously, and it's an evolution, right? There's no end point to it, but what does an ideal state look like for Brock Group?
I think it comprises the three typical points that we all talk about, which is people, process, and technology. So part of that is cultural, which is getting an organization to understand the value of making those changes. The business is so focused on running its business and trying to stay ahead of the technology and all these rapid shifts that are happening in the market, and they stay very focused on that. If they don't already have a culture of that innovative and adaptable, agile need, then sometimes IT can be a very good way, as Holger was talking about, just in the changes happening on the data side. We can come in and give them an idea of what can be done to help change what's available, and then start to open that discussion into giving them a view and giving us an opening to say, well, what else can you do? And then the technology side is, I like the way Soma was just putting it. In the old ways, being legacy and siloed and segregated, just doesn't work. Not today's environment. But having a core platform that I kind of think of it as being an accessible platform. For us, it's APIs and integration, all that good stuff. But I don't want to go build an AP cycle. I don't want to do that. It's been done. It works. Great. I do want to focus on the things that are unique to our business and create competitive advantages there. And so I want to take our knowledge, our business understanding, and be able to create that. But I want to build into this accessible platform for those rote activities that need to be reliable, auditable, and then be able to get the information out of that across all the activities that we're building into that. So those three things I think are so critical. And where we play with that technology piece is the technologies have changed, and and the processes related to them, as Holger was talking about, with agile methodologies of how to initiate that and just continually reiterate on those things. We have opportunities today that we just haven't had in decades past, and newer platforms coming out now allow us to have that sort of accessible core so that I can build those unique, discrete activities that are strategic to our business and continue to leverage that core that's always through there.
Gentlemen, it's been such a pleasure having you on the program. And that wraps up today's episode of Double Click. A huge thanks to our guests, Lloyd, Holger, and Soma, and to all of you who joined us today. Goodbye for now, and we'll see you next time.